Hi, very glad to see you on the channel. Before you start listening to the story, write in the comments whether you like the voice on the video. I had spent years thinking that love meant patience, that a good husband made sacrifices, held his tongue, and let the small things go. I thought I was being strong by staying quiet, by brushing off Emily's sharp words, by telling myself that things weren't as bad as they seemed. But love shouldn't feel like walking on eggshells. It had been happening for years, little by little. It started with the way she talked to me when we were alone, her tone sharp, dismissive. I'd bring up ideas, plans for the future, and she'd roll her eyes, acting like my thoughts didn't matter. It wasn't outright cruelty, just an erosion of respect so slow I barely noticed at first. Then it got worse. I had always taken pride in being a provider, in working hard to give Emily a comfortable life. But somewhere along the way, that wasn't enough for her. She started making comments, comparing me to her friends' husbands. You know, Lisa's husband just got a promotion. They're thinking of buying a summer home, she'd say, swirling her wine glass like it was just casual conversation. Or worse, when we were with people, she'd turn me into a joke. Jake, a handyman with big dreams. She laughed at a dinner party once when I mentioned wanting to start my own contracting business. Bless his heart, he still thinks he can build an empire with just a toolbox. The room chuckled, but I felt my stomach turn. She did it again and again, chipping away at my confidence, making sure I knew that, in her eyes, I was never enough. But the moment that changed, everything happened at a family gathering. Emily had planned a barbecue, inviting everyone over, her parents, her siblings, even some of my own family. I was in the backyard, grilling, making sure everything was perfect. That's who I was. I liked taking care of things, making sure people were happy. I heard Emily laughing from the patio, and when I turned, she was holding a drink, surrounded by a few of her friends and family. Jake's great with his hands, she said, smirking. Too bad he's not great at anything else. A few chuckles. She kept going. I mean, bless him, but if I didn't make all the decisions, we'd probably still be living in that old apartment. You should see how clueless he is with finances. I practically have to hold his hand through everything. More laughs. I stood there, tongs in my hand, watching as my wife ridiculed me in front of everyone. I felt something snap inside me. I turned off the grill and wiped my hands on a towel, walking toward the group. Emily saw me approaching, but didn't seem concerned. I stopped right beside her, looking at her friends. You know, I said, keeping my voice even, it's funny how Emily loves making me sound useless when she wouldn't last a day without me. The laughter died. Emily blinked, caught off guard. Jake, what are you talking about? I ignored her and kept going. I take care of everything. The bills, the house, the maintenance. I even set up all our automatic payments because, let's be honest, Emily doesn't know how to do it herself. I let out a small chuckle. She talks a big game, but without me, she wouldn't even remember to get the oil changed in her car. Her friends glanced at each other, shifting uncomfortably. Emily's face flushed. That's not. I turned to her, meeting her gaze. You love humiliating me, don't you? My voice was calm, but there was a weight behind my words that made her freeze. You think it makes you look strong, like you're some brilliant, put-together wife who has to babysit her idiot husband. But deep down, you need me, Emily. And the saddest part? You're too proud to admit it. Silence. Her jaw tightened, eyes flashing with anger. Jake, you're making a scene. I let out a short laugh and looked around at the small crowd still watching. Oh, I think you already did that. I turned and walked away, leaving her standing there, speechless. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling while Emily fumed silently beside me. She didn't say anything, but I could feel the tension radiating off of her. Good. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't the one feeling small. I wasn't sure what had changed in me, but I knew this. Something was different now. And I was done pretending like everything was fine. The days after the barbecue were different. Something had shifted. Emily wasn't used to being challenged, and my response in front of her family had thrown her off balance. She tried to act normal, pretending nothing had happened, but I could see it in the way she watched me, more cautious, like she was waiting for me to apologize or back down. But I wouldn't. I had spent years swallowing my pride, letting her have the last word, convincing myself that it wasn't worth the fight. But now, every time she made a snide comment, every time she rolled her eyes or sighed dramatically at something I did, I felt it grating against me. Then, the moment that broke, everything came at a dinner party with our closest friends. We were at Mark and Lisa's house, a couple we had known for years. The kind of friends who saw us often enough to know our habits, but not enough to see the cracks beneath the surface. Everyone was laughing, drinking, telling stories. And then Emily started again. "Oh, you guys should have seen Jake the other day," she said, her voice dripping with amusement. "He tried fixing the sink by himself and nearly flooded the whole kitchen." Laughter. I clenched my jaw. I had fixed the sink. The only reason there had been a problem was because Emily ignored the leaking pipe for weeks and only mentioned it when water was already seeping onto the floor. She kept going, clearly enjoying the attention. I told him to just call a plumber, but no. He had to prove he could do it himself, like some kind of macho handyman. More laughter. I forced a tight smile, keeping my hands under the table to keep from balling them into fists. Mark grinned. "Hey, at least he tried. That's more than I do." Lisa playfully smacked his arm. "Exactly. At least he does things around the house." Emily smirked, swirling her wine. "Oh, trust me, I do plenty." Something inside me snapped. I leaned forward, setting my glass down carefully. "Yeah, you do plenty, like spending all our money on useless decor and calling a design while I actually fix the house." The room went quiet. Emily's eyes widened slightly. "Excuse me?" I looked straight at her, not backing down. "You love making me the joke, Emily. It's your favorite hobby. But let's be honest. If I stopped handling things, you wouldn't know what to do." Her face darkened. "That's not true." "Oh, really?" I let out a short laugh. "Tell me, what's our mortgage payment each month?" Her lips parted slightly, but no words came out. "Right. And what's the car insurance? Or the electric bill?" Silence. Lisa cleared her throat. Maybe we should know, no?" I said, still watching Emily. "Since she has so much to say about what I don't do, I'd love to hear what she actually does." Emily's face was turning red. "That's not fair." I shrugged. "Neither is constantly humiliating your husband in front of other people." Mark shifted in his seat. "Hey, man, but I wasn't stopping. You sit here acting like I'm some bumbling idiot while you play the perfect wife. But the truth is, without me, you wouldn't even know how to function." I leaned back, shaking my head. "And maybe that's why you do it. Maybe tearing me down makes you feel less useless." Emily's jaw clenched. "Screw you, Jake." I let out a humorless chuckle. "That's the best you've got." She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. "I don't have to sit here and listen to this." I nodded. "Right. You prefer when I don't talk back. Why just sit there and take it?" She grabbed her purse. "We're leaving." I stayed in my seat. "You can leave. I'm finishing my drink." A few awkward chuckles broke the silence. Lisa shifted uncomfortably. Mark scratched his beard. Emily stared at me, waiting for me to follow like I always did. But I didn't. She scoffed. "Unbelievable." Then she stormed out. The room was thick with tension. I drained the rest of my glass before standing up. "Sorry about that." Lisa waved a hand. "It's okay." Mark looked at me carefully. "Everything all right, man?" I gave him a small smile. "Yeah, just overdue." I left a few minutes later, walking home alone. When I got there, Emily was already inside, pacing the living room. "What the hell was that?" she snapped the second I walked in. I shut the door behind me calmly. "That was me finally being done with your crap." She threw her hands up. "You embarrassed me." I let out a dry laugh. "You embarrassed yourself. You've been doing it for years. You just never thought I'd fight back." She shook her head. "You're being ridiculous." I stepped closer. "No, Emily. I've been ridiculous for letting you do this to me for so long." Her mouth opened, but she hesitated. I ran a hand through my hair, exhaling. "I'm tired, Emily. Tired of being the guy you mock. Tired of feeling like I'm never enough. And if you don't respect me, then we have nothing left to talk about." Her expression wavered for just a second, like she wanted to argue. But then she folded her arms, her face hardening. "Fine. If that's how you feel, maybe you should leave." I nodded slowly. "Maybe I should." Her eyebrows lifted slightly, like she hadn't expected me to agree so easily. I didn't say another word. I just walked past her, heading toward the bedroom. I grabbed a bag, started throwing some clothes into it. She stood in the doorway, watching. "You're really doing this?" I zipped up the bag and slung it over my shoulder. I'm done being a joke to my own wife. I stepped past her, ignoring the way her breathing hitched. And as I walked out the door, something deep inside me felt lighter. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't just reacting. I was deciding. I had spent the night at a motel, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the air conditioning. The quiet felt strange. No forced conversations, no cold glares from across the room, no tension thick enough to choke on. Just silence. I thought it would bring me peace, but instead, it left me restless. I turned over, glancing at my phone. No messages from Emily. No missed calls. She hadn't even tried to reach out. I wasn't sure why that stung. Maybe because part of me had expected her to fight for me, to realize what she had done, to care. By morning, I knew I had to go back to the house. Not to talk, not to fix things, just to grab the rest of my things and figure out my next steps. When I walked through the door, the house was eerily still. Emily wasn't there. Maybe she was out. Maybe she was giving me space. Either way, I wasn't going to waste time. I grabbed a duffel bag and headed straight to the bedroom, pulling clothes from the drawers, tossing them inside. Then I spotted it, a small, black box tucked away in the back of her closet. It was out of place. Emily wasn't the sentimental type. She didn't keep keepsakes, didn't store away little trinkets or memories. Something about the way it was hidden sent a chill down my spine. I hesitated, then pulled it out. The lid lifted easily. Inside, a sleek watch sat on a velvet cushion not mine. An expensive brand I couldn't afford, far nicer than anything I had ever worn. Beneath it, a folded note. My stomach clenched as I picked it up, the paper crisp, freshly creased. "Can't wait for our next night together. You're worth every risk." The handwriting wasn't Emily's. I felt my pulse in my throat, a slow, seething heat rising in my chest. My fingers clenched around the note as I stared at the watch, my mind racing. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This wasn't paranoia. This was proof. Emily had always been secretive, but I had never let myself believe it was something more. I had convinced myself I was imagining things, that her distance was just stress, that the cracks in our marriage were just rough patches. But this was different. I took a deep breath, my hands steady despite the storm inside me. I didn't want to react. Not yet. I needed more. I needed everything. I pulled out my phone, my mind already working. Emily had a habit. She never logged out of her accounts. She trusted that I never checked her messages, never questioned her privacy. But today, I wasn't playing the fool anymore. I walked over to her vanity, where her tablet was charging. The screen lit up with a tap, and there it was, her email, wide open. I scrolled. Receipts for expensive dinners I never attended. Hotel reservations under a different name. Messages between her and someone labeled E. I clicked. Last night was incredible. I wish I didn't have to sneak around. I hate lying to him, but you're worth it. Let's get away for a weekend. Somewhere just for us. I clenched my jaw. The timestamp was from last week. Then I saw the name. Eric. My chest tightened. I blinked, rereading the name, as if my eyes were playing tricks on me. Eric. My best friend. The guy who had stood beside me on my wedding day, who had clapped me on the back and told me I was lucky to have a woman like Emily. The same Eric who had been in my home, drinking my beer, laughing at my jokes, acting like nothing was wrong. The betrayal hit me like a punch to the gut. I scrolled further, skimming through the messages, each one cutting deeper than the last. They had been meeting during her so-called girls' nights. Hotel rooms. Late-night rendezvous. Lies on top of lies. I inhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. I had what I needed. I had enough to destroy her. I closed the tablet, setting it back down as if nothing had happened. Then I walked to the closet, grabbed my bag, and left. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Emily had played me for a fool. But now, I was going to make sure she never saw it coming. I drove aimlessly for hours after leaving the house. My hands were gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, but I wasn't angry, not in the way I expected to be. This wasn't blind rage. This was something colder, something sharper. This was clarity. Emily had betrayed me. Not with a stranger, not with some mistake born out of a drunken night. No, she had planned this. She had chosen this. And worst of all, she had done it with Eric, the one person I trusted outside of her. I wasn't going to let this slide. I pulled into an empty parking lot, letting my fingers tap against the steering wheel as my mind pieced together a plan. If I confronted her now, she'd deny it. She'd twist the truth, play the victim, cry about how I had pushed her away. But I wasn't going to give her that chance. I needed more. I needed undeniable proof. And once I had it, I would make sure her lies unraveled in the worst possible way. My first move was simple. Emily wasn't careful. She thought she was smart, but she relied too much on convenience. She had never changed the password on her phone since the day she got it. I knew it by heart. I drove back to the house later that night, making sure she wasn't home. The lights were off. Her car wasn't in the driveway. Probably out with him. I stepped inside, the familiarity of the place now feeling hollow. I ignored the ache in my chest, moving straight to where I knew she kept her phone when she was home, on the kitchen counter, charging. There it was. I picked it up, unlocked it, and immediately went to her messages. And there it was, everything I needed. Eric, can't stop thinking about last night. You looked incredible. Emily, wish we had more time. I hate sneaking around, but I can't stop. Eric, just say the word, and I'm yours completely. Emily, I can't yet. Not yet, but soon. My grip tightened around the phone, my jaw locking. Soon? Has she planned to leave me? Was she just waiting for the right moment? The thought made my stomach churn, but I forced myself to focus. I wasn't here to fall apart. I was here to win. I started taking screenshots, saving every single message. Then, I went to her gallery. More proof. Photos of them together, selfies in hotel rooms, pictures of her in outfits I had never seen before. She had been living a separate life. I copied everything to a flash drive, then logged into her email. More evidence, hotel reservations, dinner confirmations, even a flight booking for a trip she had planned with him. A weekend getaway. I exhaled slowly, forcing my heartbeat to steady. I transferred all. Every message, every picture, every detail. By the time I was done, I had enough to destroy her world 10 times over. Now, I needed to be patient. I placed her phone exactly where I found it, erasing any trace of my activity. Then I left. The next step was trickier. I needed to know where she was going, who she was meeting when she was meeting him. I needed to catch them in the act, make sure there was no way out. That's when I remembered the GPS tracker. A few years ago, when we had an issue with car thefts in the neighborhood, I had bought a small tracker for Emily's car. She never even noticed when I installed it. I pulled up the app, my fingers steady as I refreshed the location. Her car was parked outside a familiar hotel. Of course it is. I clenched my jaw. I could go there now, storm inside, catch them red-handed. But no, that would be too easy, too predictable. She'd cry. Eric would act like a fool, and it would turn into a messy argument that she would later try to rewrite. No, I needed this to be public. Emily had planned a big baby shower. She had invited everyone, family, friends, people from her past and present. She had wanted a grand celebration for the life she was bringing into the world. A life she had claimed was mine. That's when it clicked. I wasn't going to confront her at the hotel. I was going to expose her in front of everyone she held dear. I started making my moves. First, I contacted Eric's wife. She deserved to know. When she answered the phone, her voice was groggy, like she had just woken up. Hello. I kept my voice even. Hey, it's Jake. She hesitated. Jake? What's going on? I exhaled slowly. I need to show you something. It's about Eric. Silence. What? I glanced at my laptop screen, where her husband's messages to my wife stared back at me. I'll send you the proof. Just prepare yourself. Another pause. Then a shaky, okay. I sent the files. Not even a minute later, my phone rang. She was crying. Angry, heartbroken, furious. I knew something was off, she choked out. I knew it. He kept lying, making excuses. And her? I thought she was my friend. I gripped the phone tighter. I need your help. A deep inhale. With what? I stared at the invitation Emily had left on the counter, the one for the baby's shower. Do you want revenge? I asked. Her breath steadied. Tell me what to do. That was all I needed. Over the next few days, I set everything in place. I printed out the photos, the messages, the proof of the affair. I made sure every single detail was saved and secured. And then I waited. The day of the baby shower arrived, and I played my part perfectly. I smiled, I shook hands, I thanked people for coming. Emily beamed beside me, glowing in her dress, playing the role of the perfect wife. If only she knew what was coming. I felt Eric's presence before I even saw him. He walked in with his wife, his face carefully neutral, unaware that his world was seconds away from collapsing. Emily greeted him with a warm smile, her fingers brushing against his arm. His wife stiffened beside him, her lips pressed into a thin line. I watched it all unfold with a calm I had never felt before. And then, when the time was right, I stood up and picked up my glass. I smiled at the crowd. Thank you all for being here today. It means a lot to celebrate this moment with family and friends. Emily's face lit up, expecting some heartfelt speech. I turned to her, my smile never fading. And since we're celebrating life, I said, holding up an envelope, let's talk about whose life we're really celebrating. I handed it to her. She frowned, confused, before slowly pulling out the contents. The first thing she saw was a photo of her and Eric sneaking into a hotel room. The room went silent. Her face drained of color. Eric's wife stood, glaring. You lying, cheating, chaos erupted. Emily looked up at me, her eyes pleading. Jake, I cut her off with a single-pointed look. You and your baby's dad can figure things out. Somewhere else. Gasps filled the room. Emily stumbled back. No, wait. I pointed at the door. She was done. The room had turned into a storm of gasps, whispers, and sharp stares. Emily stood frozen, still gripping the evidence in her trembling hands. The once perfect baby shower, decorated with pastel balloons and flower arrangements, had become a crime scene. Her crime, laid bare for everyone to see. Eric looked just as stunned. His wife, however, was far less composed. She lunged forward, grabbing the photos from Emily's hands, her breath coming in sharp bursts. You disgust me, she hissed at her husband, shaking her head in disbelief. All those nights, all those lies. How could you? Eric opened his mouth, fumbling for an excuse. It wasn't like that, but she wasn't having it. She shoved the evidence against his chest, eyes burning with rage. You think I'm stupid? Her voice cracked, raw and filled with betrayal. You lie to my face, to our faces. Emily's mother finally spoke, stepping forward with her face pale. Emily, tell me this isn't true. Emily turned to her, shaking her head frantically. Mom, I cut in, my voice calm but firm. Don't lie. Not anymore. Her eyes flickered to me, pleading, but I wasn't going to let her manipulate her way out of this. Not this time. Her father, a man who had always been reserved, finally stepped in. His face was a mask of disappointment, his voice heavy. How could you do this, Emily? After everything Jake has done for you. Tears filled her eyes, but I had no sympathy left. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. Jake, please, let's talk about this alone. I let out a small, humorless chuckle. Why? So you can twist the story? Make excuses? No, Emily. You didn't give me that respect when you decided to sleep with my best friend. More gasps. Eric shifted, glancing at the crowd like a caged animal. This isn't the time or place. Oh, I think it is. I cut in smoothly. Emily wanted a big celebration. I'm just making sure she gets one to remember. His wife turned on him again, her voice rising. So it's true? You and her. While I was home. While he was trusting you. Eric took a step closer, lowering his voice as if that would soften the blow. Listen, babe, don't you babe me, she snapped, her voice shaking. We're done. She grabbed the envelope, turned on her heel, and stormed out. The whispers in the room grew louder. A few of Emily's friends were already backing away from her, as if being too close might make them guilty by association. Her mother looked ready to collapse. Emily turned to me, desperation in her voice. Jake, please, let's just talk. I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. You lied to me, over and over again. You planned a whole life with another man while letting me believe this baby was mine. She reached out, but I stepped back. I didn't plan it this way, she whispered, her voice cracking. I scoffed. That's not an apology. That's damage control. She swallowed hard, eyes darting around, looking for an escape. There wasn't one. Finally, her mother spoke again, her voice trembling. Jake, what are you going to do? I looked at Emily, my decision already made. I'm leaving. She blinked, stunned. No, Jake, wait, I didn't. I turned, heading for the door. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to scream. I was going to let her live in this moment, in the wreckage of her own making. And I was never looking back. I drove without a destination, the weight of everything pressing against my chest like a cinder block. The baby shower had ended in disaster, just as I had planned. But as I replayed the moment over and over in my mind, I couldn't shake the strange emptiness settling in. I had spent weeks preparing, carefully gathering proof, waiting for the perfect moment to rip the truth wide open. And now that I had done it, now that Emily's entire world had imploded in front of family and friends, I thought I'd feel free. Instead, I just felt tired. I pulled into a deserted parking lot, gripping the steering wheel with both hands, my forehead resting against the cool leather. The silence in the car was suffocating, thick with everything I didn't want to feel. The betrayal, the anger, the years of wasted effort trying to be enough for a woman who had never valued me in the first place. The vibration of my phone snapped me out of my daze. Emily. I let it ring. Then another call. Then another. A text popped up. Emily. Jake, please come home. We need to talk. I stared at the message, my thumb hovering over the screen. Every part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her sit in the mess she had created. But a darker part of me needed to hear what she had to say. I turned the key, the engine humming to life as I pulled out of the lot, heading back to the house that no longer felt like home. By the time I arrived, her car was already in the driveway. The front door was slightly ajar, a faint glow spilling out from the hallway light. I stepped inside, closing the door behind me, the sound echoing in the quiet space. Emily was sitting on the couch, her face pale, her eyes red-rimmed. Her hands were trembling slightly, gripping the fabric of her dress like she was trying to ground herself. I didn't sit. I didn't offer a word. I just stood there, arms crossed, waiting. She swallowed hard, looking up at me. You didn't have to do that. I let out a humorless chuckle. Didn't I? Her eyes darted away, shame creeping into her expression. You could have just talked to me. We could have figured something out. But humiliating me like that. I cut her off, my voice cold. Like you humiliated me? For months? For years? Her lips parted, but no sound came out. I stepped closer, my tone sharp. You lied. You cheated. You made me believe that baby was mine. And now you're mad because I didn't let you control the narrative. Tears welled in her eyes. I never meant to hurt you. I scoffed. You don't get to say that. You chose to hurt me every single time you snuck around with Eric. Every time you looked me in the eyes and pretended to be my wife. She sniffled, wiping her face with the back of her hand. I was scared. Scared of what? I demanded. She let out a shaky breath. Of losing you. Of ruining everything. I shook my head in disbelief. That's rich. You did ruin everything, Emily. And you weren't scared when you were with him. You weren't scared when you were making plans for a life with another man while pretending to build one with me. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her emotions clawing their way out. I didn't plan this, Jake. I exhaled sharply, running a hand down my face. You did. Maybe not at first, but you let it happen. And then you lied. You let me believe that baby was mine. Her face crumpled, guilt flashing across her features. I didn't know what else to do. I stared at her, my voice quieter now but firm. You could have told me the truth. A single tear slipped down her cheek. I was afraid you'd leave me. I shook my head, a bitter laugh escaping. And now I am. Panic flared in her eyes. No, Jake, please. She reached out, but I took a step back. No, I said, my voice steady. I deserve better than this. I deserve better than you. She sucked in a sharp breath, her body trembling. We can fix this. I arched a brow. Fix what? Our marriage? Our trust? The fact that you're pregnant with his baby? Her face contorted with pain, her shoulders slumping. Please, for the first time in our relationship, I saw her as small. Not in the way she used to make me feel, but in a way that showed just how little she truly was. She had nothing left. No excuses, no manipulations, no lies that could fix what she had broken. And I didn't feel sorry for her. I turned for the door. Her voice broke behind me. "Don't do this." I paused, my hand resting on the knob. I looked over my shoulder, meeting her eyes one last time. I already did. Then I walked out, and I didn't look back. I had walked out of that house for the last time, but the war was far from over. Leaving Emily behind wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of what came next. I wanted to be free of her, but that wasn't going to happen until the divorce was final. And I knew Emily well enough to expect a fight. She wasn't going to let go easily, not when her carefully built world was falling apart. I wasted no time. The next morning, I met with a divorce attorney. The office smelled of leather and old books, the kind of place where battles weren't fought with fists, but with paperwork and legal loopholes. My lawyer was a sharp, no-nonsense woman who had seen enough cases like mine to know exactly how this would play out. "She's going to contest this," she said, flipping through the folder of evidence I had brought with me. Photos, messages, financial records, proof of her affair. Especially since there's a child involved. I exhaled, already feeling the exhaustion creeping in. "I know, but that baby isn't mine." She nodded. "Paternity test will clear that up. But she might try to delay it, drag things out, claim you abandoned her." I scoffed. "She's the one who broke our vows. That won't stop her from playing the victim," she warned. "Right now, she's desperate. She's lost her reputation, her family's respect, and soon, she'll realize she's about to lose her financial stability too. She has nothing left but the fight." I leaned back in the chair, staring at the ceiling. I knew Emily. I knew how she operated. She would try to paint me as the bad guy, try to rewrite history to make herself look like the wounded party. But I wasn't going to let that happen. The next few weeks were brutal. Emily bombarded me with messages, some begging for forgiveness, others filled with venom. One minute, she was sobbing over the phone, telling me we could fix this. The next, she was threatening to take everything from me. "You just walking away?" she screamed in one voicemail. "After everything? After us?" I deleted the message without listening to the rest. Then the legal papers arrived. She was contesting the divorce. She wanted spousal support, claiming she had sacrificed her career for our marriage. She wanted the house. She wanted money. I expected it. But expecting something didn't make it any less infuriating. My lawyer, however, was ready. "She cheated. We have proof. And if she tries to drag this through court, we'll make sure the judge sees every single piece of evidence." Emily's lawyer must have advised her the same, because a few days later, she sent another message. "Let's talk. Just the two of us. No lawyers." I debated ignoring it, but part of me wanted to see how far she'd go. We met at a small cafe in town. She looked different, more fragile, like the weight of her own choices was finally catching up to her. She played with the rim of her coffee cup, avoiding my gaze. "I don't want this to be ugly," she finally said. I chuckled. "A little late for that, don't you think?" She flinched. "Jake, I know, I cut in. Whatever excuse you have, whatever reason you think justifies what you did, I don't want to hear it." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Fine. Then let's just talk about the divorce." I gestured for her to continue. She hesitated. "I want to keep the house." I shook my head. "Not happening." "Jake, you don't get to ask for favors." I interrupted, my tone firm. "You didn't just cheat. You lied. You tried to trap me into raising his child. You humiliated me. And now you want to walk away with everything." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't have anywhere else to go." I leaned forward, meeting her gaze. "Not my problem." She let out a shaky breath. "Can we at least settle this without lawyers?" I smirked. "If you wanted that, you shouldn't have contested the divorce." She looked desperate now. "Jake, please." I stood up, tossing a few bills onto the table. "See you in court." The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. Emily showed up looking meek, playing her role perfectly, but the judge wasn't blind to the evidence we presented. The affair, the financial records, the paternity test that proved the child wasn't mine. Her case crumbled before it even started. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor. The house was mine to sell. She wasn't getting a dime of spousal support. And as for the child, that was Eric's mess to deal with. Emily walked out of that courtroom with nothing. And for the first time in years, I walked away feeling free. Thank you for listening to the end. I hope you enjoyed it very much. Don't forget to give a like and tell us in the comments what you would do in such a situation.